Good evening. I know it has been a little while with not only Gencon, but when I came back from Gencon, I had the usual con crud, but it turned out to be COVID. And I was out for a little bit longer than expected. Not really in a place voice-wise to do videos like this. So yeah, a bit of a long gap, quick news here, but ultimately, because Gencon was Gencon and Jessica went there and they had their one little bout of announcements they wanted to do, and then they had a lot of, oh, we're back from Gencon, we're recovering, we're catching up. There hasn't actually been that much news besides the Gencon announcements, so we can run through these pretty quick and maybe even have time to talk about a little bit more. So, announced at Gencon, starting with Season 3, they're going to start doing store-level provisional championships. So you'll be able to get provisionals without having to do these big online provisional promos, not only at these big online events, not only like random convention side events, but also at your local stores. We don't have a whole lot of details about how these are specifically going to work. We know they've said the winner's going to get 2 of every promo. We don't know what the non-winners are going to get. But presumably this is going to run through UGN, the Play.MHA card game web app. So if your store is not on there, if you are not already running your weekly events on there, or your local whatever kind of events you do on there, you should start doing it just to get your store in there. We don't know what the requirements are going to be yet. There might be something like, hey, your store has to have run, X number of weeklies before they can have a provisional or something like that. So if you're not on there already, get on there as soon as you can for your stores, for your local events, for whatever you're doing, so that you'll be good to go whatever the requirements are there. In addition, they talked a lot, as promised, they talked a bunch about international play. First and foremost, in September and October, there's going to be a bit of sort of like a sprint, like a burst of international play. They're going to have international online regionals set up, as well as the international scenes, of course, going to get their own store provisionals. And in this time frame, all of those events are going to offer all 3 seasons of provisional and regional promos. So presumably, if you win one of these, you'll get 3 gold cards, or maybe, first, second, third will each get a gold card or something like that. So yeah, that's exciting. Those events are going to be pretty big and flashy, and it's cool to see international finally getting some organized play support. The regionals will be online. We're not going to see in-person international events until the International Nationals in November, which they also announced. No hard dates, no locations, nothing like that. Again, a lot of these details are to be posted on the website soon, TM. I don't know, my understanding is the holdup is some sort of web banner approvals or something like that, but we should see that this week sometime, I would assume. The full details of these, they'll go without the banners if they have to, whatever. But yeah, in November, we're going to have our nationals, North America, EU, Australia, presumably some online nationals. And these are going to form the bulk of the invites to the Big Cash Invitational at the end of the year. Top 8 NA, Top 8 EU, Top 2 Australia, and Top 4 of the online one will all get invites to the big $250,000 purse tournament, assuming that's still the purse. They haven't talked about that too much in the interim, but there's no reason to believe that they've changed. They're just maybe Japan doesn't like them advertising it too much. Yeah, so those are coming in November. We're waiting details on those. Other than the big announcements, just a few other little points from the week. If you played at Gen Con in events and you couldn't go to the vendor hall because you were busy in the card hall playing in events, you should at some point soon get some sort of order form from Jasco allowing you to order the playmats if you want them. I'm guessing they still have some details to work out on that, because I don't think they've sent those out yet. At least I haven't heard about it. So if that hasn't been sent out, those are still coming if you didn't know about it. There's a brief talk after this weekend's online provisional. Nothing official or formal or precise or anything, but in case you weren't already expecting this, they do plan to continue having webcam events to an extent, but they do want going forward most of their events to be in person. The number that was thrown out is like maybe 25% of our big events will be webcam events. Which, makes sense, kind of aligns with even what we've seen with these seasons. The regionals have been like this, where 2 or 3 out of 4 regionals has been in person. And with the in-store provisionals coming, they won't necessarily need to be as big of a push for online provisionals, but we'll see you know, how much those seem to continue. So yeah, nothing too surprising there. A reminder that the loyalty point changes are kicking in on the 20th. That is in 4 or 5 days. I believe that's Saturday? That is Saturday. So if you want to spend your existing loyalty points on existing promos at their existing prices, you need to do that by the end of the week. After that, the price of everything is going to go up. You're going to start getting a lot more points, but the price of everything is going to go up. It's like a loyalty points inflation. So anything you want to order, get that done now. Get that out of the way, so you don't get, you know, stuck. If you still need, you know, want non-foil plus ultras, and you have enough loyalty points to buy those, you should go get that taken care of, right? Yeah, and lastly, you know, we had a couple events, right? The Gencon Regional and an online provisional the following weekend. And it turned out that Asui won both. Specifically, the life, quote-unquote, Master Asia style Asui that's 50 cards or close to it, around 40% attacks, tons of card draw, just trying to really go all in on the how many attacks can I draw, because I'm Asui and I can pass every single attack that I draw. And, you know, we weren't really sure. We knew this deck showed up in the top 16 in Orlando and was very frustrating for some people to play against. Didn't really know how competitive it was. You know, would it be able to repeat that? And, you know, not everybody playing that deck made top cuts or whatever, but it's still good enough to win both events. There were other Asuis in top cuts. There was the finals of the provisional was 2 Asuis. So yeah, frustration with Asui kind of at an all-time high. Not just because of her success, but just because of the way, especially this deck tends to win its games. And yeah, on that note, segue into a little bit of a side topic of, you know, obviously there's a lot of talk about, you know, banning Asui, banning cards that are in Asui, errata, etc., etc. And let's say, you know, there's somebody asked the question during the stream of the provisional this weekend that was interesting because, you know, if you're new to card games, or even if you're just new to this card game, it can be really unclear about what does it take for a card to get banned. Like, what's the difference between a deck that's just winning and a deck that needs to be banned, right? So I kind of wanted to touch on that here. Just, you know, for people that aren't too familiar with it, especially this game might be a little bit different from other games with the way it approaches card action. And I'm speaking historically here. There's no guarantee that this is how the current team's going to behave. Right, but I think these things are probably going to continue to be true for the most part, in terms of, like, being good enough reasons to have to hit something. So yeah, so real quick, first and foremost, obviously, if something is overwhelmingly dominating the competitive scene, if one character or a specific card, you know, a specific attacker foundation or something, like, you have to be running this card or your deck's just worse than everything else, and you can plainly see it, like, the data's going to make it obvious, the tournament results are going to make it obvious, you're going to have, you know, 9x copies of things in top 16s or things like that. The Kirishima 1 situation, yes, something's going to get hit. That's pretty cut and dry. I don't think there's too much to argue with there. But that's sort of the classic case of, like, yes, something needs to be done here. The other things that happen in this game that maybe other games don't do as much. This game historically has banned things for being, they'll call it NPE, negative play experience, but what they really mean is games that are just not really interactive, where, you know, one player is basically getting to play solitaire and the other player can either scoop or watch them, right? And this is a tricky one because it's all about degree and things like that, because obviously being able to win in ways that your opponent can't do anything about is a good competitive thing, right? That's, you know, if you're playing a competitive deck, you strongly prefer to be able to win in ways that your opponent can't do anything about. So, you know, it's a little subjective and kind of experience-based of, like, okay, what's not interactive in a way where, like, oh, well, if you were playing a different deck, or, you know, if you didn't sell at your attack turn, or like, oh, it only happens 10% of the time. It's like, you can always get turn 2'd by just a really hot hand or whatever, right? You can always have, like, Dobby drew 3 double jab pummels. that mean Dobby's a problem? No. That's just going to happen sometimes, right? But I think most people feel that Asui is sort of in violation of this, where, especially this life build, what it's trying to do is it's trying to set up a situation where it's going to play 7 to 10 attacks on turn 2 or 3, and just be way more than you can reasonably expect the deck to be stopping. And it's got enough check passing power that it gets over the first hate piece usually, and it's pretty consistent at finding these strings, so you can still beat it by racing it or whatever. Sometimes it's going to get a little unlucky and not find that gas, but more often than not, what happens when you face this deck is that she gets her stuff, she does her thing, you maybe do like, you throw some token blocks out there, but you know that they don't matter. And you just have to watch her go through the motions to confirm that, yes, she drew that many cards. You know, she found all the attacks that she needed. And you're kind of just stuck there watching her play solitaire. So that vibe and the amount that she does it, combined with the fact that she's meta relevant, she's doing well enough that this matters, right? It's not like you could have a gut shot deck that's not really interactive at all. As long as gut shot decks aren't good, right? As long as they're not winning enough to actually be meaningful presences at tournaments, it's kind of fine to have like weird meme kitchen table decks like that, right? But this Asui deck is obviously quite good and is probably in violation of this, so that's why people are expecting something to happen to, if not to Asui, then to some of the pieces that fuel this deck, and we'll see what happens of that. Real quick, the other two things that you could have, one is sort of an unreasonable meta constraint, where again the deck has to be good enough to be a relevant part of the meta, but if dealing with this deck means that you have to cut your deck options down by like 80%, and that deck's just sort of forcing people to instead of having 20 deck options to have 4, that's not really okay. Like, even if the constraining deck's not winning everything, it's good enough that it's around enough that just sort of single-handedly it's cutting the size of the meta by that much, then that's going to be enough of a problem to ban it. Again, historically. It's hard. There's some of this now. Like, you could see Moneta 2 getting to that point, right? Like, if Moneta 2 is 10% of the field at some point, reliably, and you just can't play something that has problems with, you know, the pool clog or whatever, that could be enough to see something get done to him, for instance. Yeah, that's the third thing. And the fourth thing doesn't happen too much, but sometimes you have a card that's just just really causing problems for design, where like they just can't print a certain type of card because X is around. And because X is doing something that is either like a huge combo problem threat, or just is doing something at a rate that is only okay if, you know, with a small card pool or whatever. So that's the other thing that comes up from time to time. You would see Unwavering Slash, right? The moment they decide they want to print a high difficulty asset that does good things, they might have to ban that card. Requesting Assistance is kind of like this. So that's the other thing that could come up. That one's weird because it's never like a necessity ban, it's always sort of preemptive. But those things can happen too. Yeah, so hopefully, you know, for people that are newer to the game, that sort of sheds some light on the sorts of things you can see. And yeah, this is run a little bit long. I probably need to think about how long it takes to explain some of these things. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if that helps, or if I could clarify any of those a little bit. But we'll see what happens in the coming days. And my music is up, as expected. And yeah, we'll cut it off here. I will do a preview video once we're done with all the characters. I'll just do one for all the characters. Once we don't know how many more there are going to be. There are going to be like 2 or 3 more. And then yeah, presumably some news vids covering what we're assuming is going to be some sort of actions taken on some cards this week. Yeah, busy week. Until then, take care. Have a good night.